like to get into the future of work, and perhaps one of the first questions that we can get into is what is the first flaw that you find about the current workplace, the current state of how we see work itself, and how do you think we could like try to fix it?
Yeah, I actually think that's the wrong frame. I reject that framing. I think everyone looks at things as like broken, right? The current world of work is an emergent system. It's constantly changing. The world of work is totally different than it was 20 years ago. 20 years from now, it's going to be totally different. So I think often when people are like, oh, capitalism is the worst, it produces all these bad situations. It's like there is no capitalism. Capitalism is just a set of incentives that exist, our current paradigm, and it's constantly evolving and changing through human action, right? And often our workplace is a emergent order of our human desires and interests and motivations, right? So oftentimes when we're criticizing work, we're just criticizing our natural human nature,
Hmm.
right? So I think the current world of work is way better than it was 40 years ago. Most people would not want to go back to the 1980s and work in a similar job. It would not be enjoyable. There'd be a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
There'd be a lot of inefficiency. There'd be a lot of sexism. There'd be a lot of like, don't be your full self at work. I think it'd be intolerable for most people. Now, I think the challenge of today's work is people are so desperate to find a place. They want to find a home. They want to find a connection to work. And I think the challenge is it's so hard to find that in a job container.
Hmm.
And I think what's enabled me to be happier with my work and my path is I've sort of let go of like ever finding a dream situation. For me, it's just finding a good enough situation. I like writing. I have enough space to do it. I have to do a bunch of stuff like I like but don't love to make money. And that's like good enough, feels sustainable, and is like a good setup for my current life.
I see.
Um, I think I was most unhappy when I was trying to find a dream job.
Yeah. That's mostly where a lot of people find themselves, trying to find that dream job.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think, oh, if I do what I love and make money from it, everything will be great. Now, finding that in a job is incredibly hard because jobs mean you have to do administrative stuff. You have to play political games. You're like reacting to the actual environment you're in. It's just really, really hard to find that. And we've sort of misled a generation of people telling them, oh, you can find meaningful work in a job. And all these companies are promising it. Do the most meaningful work of your career. That's what Facebook's career page says. Now, people go work at Facebook and they enjoy it maybe for a year or two. It's challenging, it's new, you're learning a lot. But then after a couple of years, it's like, oh my gosh, the bureaucracy, the amount of teams, the performance reviews, the like stuff I have to do to get promoted, it drains people's soul, right? So you
Mm.
might do your most meaningful work of your career like 10 of the hours of the week, but it's the other 30 hours of the week that are going to be really hard to live with.
Yeah. And this is very interesting because we've been putting a lot of of energy into the workplace, into our work, into our
Yeah.
careers, that what you say is just it's taking a lot of our bandwidth. And I remember listening to Simon Sinek say something along the lines of, before the previous uh, versions of work, people would have community, would have neighbors, they would have, other activities. But now it seems that everything that we're asking for our job is we need to have that community there, we need to have the job, we have to have that income, the friends, all of that has to be involved in that place. And then all of a sudden, just the shock of finding that work is in everything, although we are investing most of our energy in it. So this dissonance between, what we're trying to do in the workplace and just the reality of
Yeah.
honestly w- I really enjoyed being with my peers in my work, and I thought they were my friends. But there were some themes that I was just being thrown that I was saying, no, a friend wouldn't do this, you know?
Yeah, it's people will behave based on the incentives they're given, right? Um, a lot of people in the workplace would say like, "Oh, my family's first," but then they get a promotion or offered a massive raise, and they're like, "Well, you have to work more," and they'll be like, "Well, this is the best thing I can do for my family." And it's like there's a lot of mental jujitsu that happens to make that and hold those beliefs in your head.
Yeah.
I struggle with not having like consistency between what I claim to care about and what I'm actually doing with my time. And I ultimately found that like full-time work was not for me, right? And I'm not writing for the people who are like, well, you can do it because of this, or you don't understand how expensive life is. Like, those people shouldn't follow my stuff. They shouldn't read my stuff. They should find other people to follow. I'm writing for the people like you that are like, I don't know if I can make that path work either. And I just want like different ideas of how people are making it work on unconventional paths, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the future of work seems that it's going to be very revolved around, like you say, a more holistic approach, trying to remove all of the eggs in the workplace basket of life and just trying to figure out who we can be in this world and who we are already. Because it seems that those kind of questions, like the ones we were talking previously, of what am I doing here? What is work for me? Why am I working? They emerge 40 years after we work and grind and just
Yeah.
retire, like it's this investment of time. Hey Alex, I'll tell you this, you're gonna have a great career, but for 40 years you're not gonna think about your humanity. You're just gonna be in autopilot mode. And then
Yeah.
hopefully you can keep that, like I mentioned previously, that space between your true self and the mask, that you're playing the games. And when you retire, you can discover this one again, your true self. You can reconnect with it. And what happens, I just envision myself when I'm 60, knock on wood, hopefully I'll get there. I just envision myself, if I couldn't handle 2 years of playing political games and this
Yeah.
prestige bug, what does it like? No
Yeah,
one
you'll
in there.
destroy yourself.
Yeah, like for 40 years, I won't even find myself. And then
Right.
when I retire, I'll just have a nervous breakdown with chronic illnesses, and I'm gonna check out. And that seems to be a lot of what's happening with retirees now. I've done some research with people who retire from Boeing and these really high um, high execution, high leverage positions. They retire, they get their pensions, and they don't last more than a year or 2 years after retirement. They're
Yeah,
gone.
it's tough. Um, I think it's like I said before, we're just becoming more aware of the holistic value of a human life, right? If we can't move, what is life? If we can't laugh and be present, what is life? If we can't um, be happy and not have depression, what is life, right? And yeah, it's all this deferred life plan. I mean, I'm just following on people like Tim Ferriss who've been talking about this for 15 years.
Yeah.
The deferred life plan only works if everyone else is doing it and nobody talks about what they're giving up. But now people have started talking about what they're giving up, and it's becoming too painfully obvious to people that this is a bad strategy for life.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's a bad strategy, like you say. It's just, it doesn't make sense for me. It just doesn't make sense that I will be willing to invest 40 years of autopilot when I, knock on wood, like I will only have like hopefully 120 years on Earth, which is nothing. It's absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's encouraging to see that we're rejecting these invisible scripts, like you say, in terms of being an autopilot mode.